Hey there, night dwellers. Join the Phantom Troupe for a serene escape into dreamland with enchanting sleep stories. Let the calming tales transport you to a world of peaceful slumber and restful nights.
Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a king and queen who were blessed with 12 handsome and strong sons. The king, however, was troubled by a peculiar fear. He was consumed with worry about the future of his kingdom. Despite the joy his sons brought him, he was deeply concerned about how his kingdom would be divided when the time came for him to pass on his crown. For in his heart, the king longed for a daughter, a gentle princess who could inherit the throne and ensure peace throughout the land. One day the king called his queen to his chamber. "My dear," he said gravely, "I have decided that if our next child is a girl, our 12 sons must be put to death, so that she alone may inherit the kingdom, and the inheritance will remain undivided. I have already prepared 12 coffins for them, lined with fine white linen. They are hidden away, and the moment our next child is born, we will know whether the future of our sons will be life or death." The queen, horrified by this plan, wept bitterly. She could not bear the thought of losing her 12 beloved sons, and so she made a secret decision. Late that night, when the kingdom was silent and the moon hung low in the sky, she summoned her eldest son, Benjamin, to her room. "Benjamin, my dear child," she whispered, her voice trembling, "your father has decided that if our next child is a girl, you and your brothers will be killed. I cannot bear to lose you all, so you must take your brothers and flee into the forest. Stay there, and do not return until I send word that it is safe. I will give you a sign. If I send a white flag, you may come home, but if I send a red flag, you must flee even further and never return." Benjamin's heart ached with sorrow, but he nodded. He knew that he had to protect his brothers. He kissed his mother goodbye and hurried to gather his brothers. The 12 young princes, all tall and strong, slipped out of the palace that night and disappeared into the dark forest, carrying with them the heavy burden of uncertainty. The 12 brothers wandered deep into the forest, far from the reach of their father's wrath. For many days they traveled without stopping, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they might never see their mother again. They finally found a remote place, surrounded by tall, ancient trees and hidden from the world. There they built a small, humble house to live in, and they vowed to look after one another no matter what happened. In this secluded spot, they lived a simple but contented life. They hunted for food, gathered berries and herbs, and built a comfortable home for themselves. Each brother took on a specific task to ensure their survival. Benjamin, being the eldest, became the leader and made sure that his younger brothers remained safe and hopeful. Despite the quiet life they led, they could never fully shake the sadness that clung to them like a shadow. Every day, Benjamin would climb the tallest tree in the forest and look out over the vast, wild landscape, hoping to see a sign from their mother. But day after day, there was nothing. The brothers did their best to keep their spirits up. They played games, told stories, and sang songs in the evenings around the fire. Yet there was always a sense of waiting, an unspoken question lingering in the air. Would they ever be able to return home? Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen gave birth to her 13th child, a beautiful baby girl. The king was overjoyed, for his wish had been fulfilled. A princess had been born to inherit the throne. The kingdom celebrated with grand festivities, and the little princess, who was as lovely as the dawn, grew up beloved by all. But the queen never forgot her 12 sons. Though she loved her daughter dearly, her heart ached for her lost sons, who had vanished into the wilderness. She prayed every night that they were safe, and that one day she would see them again. As the years passed, the princess grew into a graceful and kind young woman, ignorant of the fate that had befallen her brothers. She knew nothing of the coffins her father had prepared, nor of the warning her mother had given Benjamin. The queen, bound by her promise to her husband, kept the secret hidden deep in her heart, even as it tormented her. One day, when the princess was about 15 years old, she happened to overhear a conversation between two servants. They were gossiping about the strange disappearance of the king's 12 sons and the mysterious coffins hidden away in the palace. Curious and disturbed, the princess confronted her mother. "Mother, is it true that I had 12 brothers who disappeared before I was born, and that there are 12 coffins prepared for them?" The queen, realizing that she could no longer keep the secret from her daughter, broke down in tears. "Yes, my child," she confessed. "It is true. You have 12 brothers who fled into the forest to escape a terrible fate. They did it to save their lives, because your father, the king, wanted you to inherit the kingdom alone." The princess was shocked by this revelation. She could hardly believe that her father had intended such a cruel fate for her brothers. Determined to find them and bring them back, she begged her mother to tell her where they might be. The queen, seeing the determination in her daughter's eyes, finally relented. She gave the princess a small bundle of clothes and some provisions for the journey. "Go, my dear child," she said, "and may God protect you. If you find your brothers, tell them that I have never stopped loving them." With a heavy heart but resolute spirit, the princess set out on her quest to find her 12 brothers. The princess journeyed through the forest for many days, braving the wild terrain, the harsh weather, and the dangers of the wilderness. She had only a vague idea of where her brothers might be, but she trusted that love would guide her to them. At last, after many trials, she came upon a small cottage hidden deep within the forest. Weary from her travels, she knocked on the door, hoping to find shelter for the night. To her surprise, the door was opened by a tall, strong young man, Benjamin, her eldest brother. "Who are you?" Benjamin asked warily, for he and his brothers had vowed to protect themselves from any harm. The princess looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I am your sister," she said softly, "the one who was born after you fled. I have come to find you and bring you home." Benjamin's eyes widened in disbelief, but when he looked closely at her, he saw the resemblance to their mother. His heart swelled with joy and sorrow all at once. "Come in," he said, his voice trembling, "and meet your brothers." The princess entered the cottage, and soon all 12 brothers gathered around her, their faces full of wonder and disbelief. They had long given up hope of ever seeing their family again, but here, before them, stood their little sister, a living connection to the world they had left behind. The brothers were overjoyed to be reunited with their sister, and they welcomed her with open arms. For a time, they lived together in happiness, savoring the moments of togetherness they had been denied for so long. The princess, who had grown up in the luxury of the palace, adapted quickly to the simple life in the forest. She was content to be with her brothers, and they, in turn, adored her. But their happiness was not to last. One day, while the princess was wandering through the garden that the brothers had cultivated near their cottage, she came upon 12 beautiful lilies, their white petals gleaming in the sunlight. Not knowing that these flowers were enchanted, she picked them to bring back to the cottage as a gift for her brothers. As soon as she plucked the flowers, a terrible thing happened. The ground beneath her trembled, and the air filled with a dark, swirling mist. The lilies in her hands withered and turned to ash, and in their place stood 12 large black ravens. The ravens cawed mournfully and then flew away, disappearing into the sky. The princess, horrified, ran back to the cottage, but it was empty. Her brothers were gone, and all that remained were the feathers left behind by the ravens. Despair washed over her as she realized that her actions had somehow cursed her brothers and turned them into birds. Determined to save them, the princess wandered through the forest, searching for a way to break the curse. She encountered an old wise woman who lived alone in a small hut deep in the woods. The old woman, seeing the princess's distress, invited her in and listened to her tale. "There is a way to break the curse," the old woman said finally, "but it will require great courage and strength. You must remain silent for 7 years. No word, no laughter, no sound must pass your lips. If you can endure this, your brothers will be restored to their human forms. But be warned, the road will be difficult, and many will try to make you speak." The princess, filled with love for her brothers, vowed to remain silent for the next 7 years, no matter what trials she might face. The princess found a hollow tree in the forest where she made her home, and there she began her years of silence. The seasons changed, and the years slowly passed. The princess lived a solitary life, keeping to herself and avoiding all contact with others to ensure that she would not be tempted to speak. However, as fate would have it, one day, while she was gathering wood, a young king from a neighboring kingdom happened upon her. He was immediately struck by her beauty and grace, even in her simple clothes. The king tried to speak to her, but she remained silent, not daring to utter a word. Intrigued by the mysterious, silent maiden, the king took her back to his castle. Despite her silence, he found himself falling in love with her, and soon he asked her to marry him. The princess, unable to explain her vow of silence, nodded in agreement. They were married in a quiet ceremony, and the princess became the queen of the kingdom. Life in the castle was difficult for the princess, for she had to endure constant questioning and gossip about her silence. The courtiers whispered behind her back, and some even accused her of being a witch. But the princess remained steadfast in her vow, never uttering a word, even when her heart ached to defend herself. As the years passed, the queen gave birth to several children. She loved them dearly, but the burden of her silence weighed heavily on her. She could not sing lullabies to her babies, nor comfort them with gentle words. Yet she remained strong, knowing that her silence was the only way to save her brothers. As the 7 years of silence neared their end, the king's enemies, who were jealous of the queen, conspired against her. They accused her of witchcraft, claiming that her silence was proof of her evil nature. The king, who loved his wife dearly, did not believe the accusations, but the pressure from his advisors and the people grew too strong. In the end, the queen was condemned to be burned at the stake. On the day of her execution, she was led out to the pyre, her heart heavy with sorrow. The people gathered to watch, some pitying her, others filled with malice. As the flames began to lick at the wood, the queen remained silent, her eyes closed in prayer. But just as the fire was about to consume her, a great commotion arose. 12 large ravens swooped down from the sky, their black feathers glistening in the sunlight. They circled the pyre, cawing loudly, and then, before the astonished eyes of the crowd, they transformed into 12 handsome young men, her brothers, restored to their human forms. The queen's vow of silence had been fulfilled, and the curse was broken. The brothers rushed to their sister's side, pulling her from the flames just in time. The king, witnessing the miraculous transformation, realized the truth of the queen's silence and ordered her immediate release. The crowd, awestruck by the turn of events, fell to their knees, begging for the queen's forgiveness. The queen, now free to speak, explained the full story to her husband and the people. The king, moved by her sacrifice and love for her brothers, embraced her and vowed to protect her from harm. The queen's brothers were welcomed into the kingdom as heroes, and they were reunited with their mother, who had long mourned their loss. From that day forward, the queen and her brothers lived in peace and happiness. The kingdom prospered under the wise and just rule of the king and queen, and the story of the 12 brothers and their sister became a cherished tale, passed down through the generations as a testament to the power of love, sacrifice, and perseverance. And so they all lived happily ever after, their bond unbroken, and their hearts full of the joy that only true family can bring.